This is ABC Fora.
I read a quote from you, and you'll correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think it was along the lines of the most important job of a parent is to deceive their child, and that the moment of sadness and tenderness for children becomes as they become aware that this wonderful protected bubble that we've created for them is somehow not what the real world is going to be. And whether I've got that quote exactly right, that sentiment of the disappointment, the loss of innocence seems to be a strong theme for you.
Yeah, I probably didn't quite mean that we have to deceive our children, but when they're very young, I think we just do. You know, all our instincts tell us that we have to protect them. And if you walk around the streets with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a baby, it's very interesting. Total strangers enter into the conspiracy with you. You know, people who are having a blazing row will suddenly stop and put on smiley faces and start speaking in funny language to your child. And you know, universally, we all want to conspire to make children believe that the world is a kinder place than it actually is. And I think that is what we all do as parents to some extent. And I think we have to do that. And occasionally, you know, sadly, more and more kids are having to grow up without this protective bubble. And I think it's a terrible thing. But I think the real challenge, both for the child and for the parent, is, you know, how do you guide them out of this bubble? You gradually start to introduce them to the bad news that, you know, actually it's not quite as nice as those smiling strangers would have you believe. And that's one of the, I guess, challenges for us. And maybe all of us as adults, we have some nostalgic memory of the time when we lived in that little childhood bubble, and we believed what our parents told us, that the world was this sweet little place with fluffy toys and smiling adults.
Almost 20 years ago, the writer Bill Bryson wrote a serious profile of you for the New York Times following the publication of The Remains of the Day. And in it, he said, it underscored the closeness in temperament between the British and the Japanese, which is not a concept that had ever occurred to me before. But he cites the suppressed emotions, the unwillingness to be explicit, the almost ritualistic politeness that characterised Stevens, the butler. And some of the cast in Nocturnes seem to share those characteristics too. I found myself once or twice almost overwhelmed by the desire to shout, "Pull yourself together," to some of the more desultory characters in Nocturnes. But you do seem to have endless reservoirs of patience for the less decisive among us. Does that present problems in terms of pacing and plot?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that. I mean, I don't think it has any implications on things like pacing and plot. It has a profound influence on the overall book and the theme. It's probably true to say that I do present a view of human nature which perhaps emphasizes that passivity. And I don't think this is entirely to do with the fact that I have a British and a Japanese background. I think that might be an influence, but I think it's more that I'm interested in. And although maybe over there in Australia or in places like the United States, there's a kind of a social mannerism that seems to be much more proactive about things, you know, the can-do mentality. I think perhaps at some deeper level, it's part of human nature that we often, to a surprising degree, we accept the little lot that's been given to us in life, and we stay in relationships that perhaps are unsatisfactory, in jobs that are unsatisfactory, in class positions that are unsatisfactory. We accept things to a surprising degree. And it's that side of things I'm quite interested in. So in my past work, as well as in Nocturnes, if you look at, say, the butler in The Remains of the Day, or the characters in my last novel, Never Let Me Go, they are almost infuriatingly accepting of a position that we think they shouldn't really accept. And I guess part of my strategy is to try and arouse a sense of frustration in the reader. I want people to say, well, why do they just accept this? Why do they do this? But then, as we go on, I want people to start thinking, well, actually, perhaps it's like a lot of us. You know, we do accept things. Perhaps because we don't have perspective. In our small world, this is normal. And actually, if you look around the world, you know, a lot of the world live in fairly ghastly conditions. And they have to get on with it. You know, they accept it and they get on with it. And there's a part of me that admires that kind of stoic side. You know, and there's a part of me that does shares with the reader that frustration, you know, says, look, come and do something about your situation. You can change it.
This is ABC Fora.